Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hello, you're listening to the podcast. So there I was. This is episode number 161, A Case of Scotch the Hard Way.
Yeah, it was. Holy.
There were so many good possible titles.
Yeah, there were. We're going to rescue him or we're going to join him, which is how he got the case of Scotch.
You are in for a true surprise. We interviewed Ben Densley, who is really a walking legend. Repeat. Just fire off some bullets of his pedigree.
The minor one is he got the DFC because, they don't hand those out. I know I asked.
He started out in the Army.
Yeah, Army, Green Beret, so badass. Night jump, saw stars.
We're talking 1959, okay? Yeah. 1960. Does a tour in Vietnam. No, actually, he did a tour in Poland. No, where did he do the tour?
We did the tour in Germany and was up in Poland, taking classes, Polish classes, yeah. Polish-speaking classes. Met his wife, who I assumed was either Polish or German. No, she's from Fort Lauderdale. So,
But then he transitioned to helicopters because he needed a pay raise due to the marriage. And then his aviation career began. And holy shit balls, what a career.
Yeah.
Tour in Vietnam, flying Huey gunships.
And slicks.
And then went back as an Air America pilot, flying out of Laos and somewhere else. And then he did that for 8 years, 2 months.
8 years as a non-combatant, and they didn't have guns except M16s.
And then went back on active duty in the Army after that.
Yeah,
flew helos again, and then transitioned to fixed wing. And then I'm not gonna cover the rest because you're gonna have to listen.
But a very eclectic career. Damn.
Oh my gosh.
What a treat this was. Quick mention that Robbie Walling at HSI Well Strategies, Robert.Walling at nm.com. Write to him or call him.
Hey, don't be a moron.
Call Robbie.
Call Robbie, for crying out loud. Don't try to manage your money yourself.
No, let Robbie put some coins in your pocket. And in the meantime, while Robbie's doing that, now you've got free time. You can listen to Ben Densley tell these amazing stories. An American legend.
This here is a true story.
You're going to like this.
About crossing the
Don't
pond
sit on the collective.
Don't.
At night, in the world's smallest cockpit, on the tanker, through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond.
So there I was. It was 11 o'clock at night, full moon at Fort Bragg, North Carolina in December 1959. I was making my 25th jump and got overly excited. And as I turned to go out the door, my static line went underneath my left arm, and I ended up hitting the side of the aircraft as we got to the end of the static line, and it deployed my parachute. So I saw stars.
Oh boy.
And got my bell rung pretty good. But after the risers straightened themselves out, I checked my canopy and everything looked good, except my left arm didn't feel very good, and I didn't know if I had broken it or if it was dislocated or what. So I'm looking at the ground, and we're going across the ground quite rapidly according to my shadow.
Oh boy.
And I decided I was going to find out if that arm was broken or dislocated, or I was going to bust my fanny when I hit the ground. So I reached up, both hands, and pulled in as much of a slip into the wind as I could, and then managed to hit the only hard part of Sicily drop zone at Fort Bragg, which is 10 miles long and 2 miles wide. But I saw stars again, and because the wind was dragging the parachute, I got up, ran around the parachute, and then got out of the parachute, put it in my kit bag, and took the reserve parachute, hooked it through one of the loops, threw it over my right shoulder, and started heading into the marshalling area. About this time, I noticed an ambulance coming out onto the drop zone with the lights, siren, and the whole bit. And I guess I was just about on the verge of going into shock. And I turned and looked around to see who got hurt. So they went past me, and I kept going into the marshalling area, turned in my parachute, and then I was the demolition supervisor, and our medic, who is a good friend of mine, saw my state and got me in the shock position, my feet up in the air, and we waited for an ambulance to take me into Fort Bragg. So it was a rather exciting night, and because they had a great big accident happen out on Fort Bragg Boulevard. I got to sit for about an hour and a half and waited my turn.
Oh my
And all
gosh.
these people who had been injured in the car crash
Oh my
were
gosh.
given their urgent care. And when they finally got around to me, took an x-ray and got to bed about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then promptly at 8 o'clock, the nurse got us all up to make our beds and do good. But that was my moment in time where I got to flex my left arm, and it looked like the Hulk. The same color.
Oh my gosh. Was it broken? Was it dislocated? Was it broken?
No, actually, I had just torn the bicep, and there was a thin piece of the bicep still intact.
Oh my
So
gosh.
they decided, now you're good to go, and
Oh, you're good to go.
Give me the willies.
Well, that is well, that's your "So There I Was" story, and that's not for the faint of heart. This is Fig. Welcome to "So There I Was," and I'm at home in Kearney. Thank the Lord, I got home last night. Where's my co-host?
I'm at home in New Hampshire. Greetings, everybody. Repeat here. And we are thrilled and honored to welcome former Special Forces Green Beret, helicopter pilot, Air America pilot, President Trump pilot, NTSB, and all kinds of other things, Ben Densley. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us. We're honored. An American, a genuine American hero and badass. I know you're too humble to say that, so I'm going to say it for you. Thank you.
That's right. Well done, sir. Well done.
So how is it you wound up in that airplane that night and becoming a Green Beret? What led you to go military in the first place?
well, I was 17 after Korea,
Okay.
and so I had to sign up with the Selective Service, and I joined the Navy Reserve for a couple of years. But after one tour or a cruise to Hawaii and looking out across that big body of water called the Pacific, I decided I didn't swim that well.
Okay.
I was going to go in the Army, and if the enemy wanted to kill me, they would have to crawl in my foxhole with me. But as it worked out, my father raised me to be a gentleman, and one night I gave a couple of young ladies a ride home, and being a gentleman, like I said, I walked the young lady to the door, and when her father came to the door, it turned out he was a Army recruiter.
Okay.
So he said, if you guys are looking for something exciting to do, come on down and talk to me. And we walked into his office in downtown Salt Lake City, and on the wall was a just about full-size poster with a Green Beret rappelling down a cliff with his beret on and his knapsack. And I said, that's what I want to do. So we, four of us joined up together and went through first 8 weeks of basic training, second 8 weeks of basic training, and then jump school. Ended up in Fort Bragg, North Carolina in April of 1957. And
Wow. That's awesome. That's absolutely incredible. So jump school, but the opening you said was in 59. So it took you a while before your first night jump.
Well, first night jump was actually what they call your cherry jump when you
Okay.
take your sixth jump after flight or jump school.
Okay.
And it was at Fort Bragg. It was about actually 2 weeks after we got there. And so that was number 6, and it was a night jump. And I was the man in the left door, first to go. So the guy patted me on the fanny and I jumped.
Man. Okay. Well, that's awesome. So when did you wind up in the special forces going to Green Beret?
Well, that was when I went there. We arrived in April of 57
Okay.
after jump school. And
Okay.
at that time, the special forces had been started up in 1952. So by 1956, the majority of your cadre who were in the teams were people from the Second World War and from Korea, and they were all veterans, but the majority of them were, at minimum, were E5 to E7. And so us new guys, we kind of got the job of KP, guard duty, KP, and guard duty, and then in between go across the road and get some training. So it took about a year and a half before I actually had an opportunity to do better, and I volunteered to go down to Key West, Florida, to the Navy underwater swimmer school.
Okay.
Because I was a demolitionist, that I was the logical pick, and I graduated top 10. So when I came to Fort Bragg, returned to Fort Bragg, they had given me my 3 suffix as Special Forces qualified, and I was promoted to corporal. So no more KP and no more guard.
Nice. Rank has its privileges. RHIP. Awesome. Okay. So what did you wind up doing after that? Where was your first? Did you stay at Fort Bragg or did you deploy?
I stayed at Fort Bragg, and it was an interesting time because the Army, they make these off-the-wall decisions, and so they decided they were going to train some people who, after basic training, instead of going to second 8 weeks of basic infantry, artillery, or signal or whatever, they were going to send 250 of them to Fort Bragg for special forces training. And being a corporal demolitionist, I had the great opportunity to give them introduction to demolitions training.
Okay.
All right.
Learning to blow shit up, in other words.
I did, and I tried to make it as interesting as possible. So we would go, I had a specialist who was working with me to do the training.
Okay.
He would go out into the woods and put a quarter pound of TNT that was electrically wired with a blasting cap,
Okay.
run the line back behind my chalkboard. And then I would put all of the demolitions and det cord and all the other accessories. And about the time it was time for 50-minute break, my specialist would go back behind the chalkboard and warm up the blasting machine and get it wired up. And I would be at that point where I had gone through the electric, non-electric blasting caps and all the different explosives, explaining that the TNT was very dangerous and your dynamite was not. You could shoot it, break it up, didn't matter. And all of your C3 and C4 were, you had to have a blasting cap to make them explode. And I would throw each of them into my group sitting in bleachers. And the last explosive that they threw back was the dynamite. And I'd drop it, and my specialist would crank off that blast about 100 yards away. And it was break time. Everybody emptied the stands, some of them over backwards from the top. And then it took 10 minutes to round them all up and get them back into class.
It was
Ooh,
break time.
pick me. I know what else they emptied.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that's fantastic.
That is.
What was the most fun to work with? Was it C4, TNT? What'd you have the most fun in demolition? That seemed like a cool job.
Well, the most fun I thought was the special demo where you could take blocks of C4 and cut it into 1-inch slices and actually mold into a charge that was much more effective than dynamite or, anyhow.
Nice. Yeah.
It was very effective. In fact, we had the drive shaft from a destroyer, which is high carbon steel,
Yeah.
and was 29 inches in diameter.
Uh-oh.
So you figure that big took, by Corps of Engineer formula, 60 pounds of TNT primed, what they called, not padded, but it was encased.
Okay.
More effective. It took 60 pounds, whereas I could make a special charge with the C4 primed at both ends, go completely around, and when you detonated it, cracked it in half like some big giant had just come and snapped it in half.
Wow.
Yeah. That's legit.
Oh, man, I don't even want to get to aviation. I just want to talk demolition, man. This is cool stuff, man.
Well,
Okay, so so it was relatively calm between Korea and Vietnam cranking up, but did you find yourself in Vietnam in the early stages, and how'd you wind up over there? Or am I skipping huge chunks of things that happened?
Well, essentially, after my first 3 years was up, I got out intending to go to college.
Okay.
And after I realized I couldn't afford that, I reenlisted and was selected for a special mission training. And we found out later that we were going to a little country called Laos.
Okay.
At that time, no American troops were allowed, naturally, because they just signed the 1954 Geneva Convention, and the ink was barely dry. We already had Special Forces troops in there. So our team, which was called, the operation was called Hotfoot, our team flew over to Bangkok on a C-124,
Okay.
which took several days of island hopping and losing an engine in the Philippines, and finally got to Bangkok after 15 days.
Oh my gosh.
Then we got on Air America C-46 and flew up to the Plains de Jars, which is a lovely spot in Laos. And there we spent 6 months working with the Hmong people and the Lao school that we had up there. We had officers, NCOs, that We trained in demolitions and light weapons. The French Foreign Legion would not allow us to do any other training, no tactics or anything like that. So we enjoyed ourselves. And then when the time came for them to show their skills, and the Foreign Legion people took them out and they did their raids and ambushes, and that was the end of the training.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So 6 months in operating out of Laos,
Yes.
and then back to the States.
I went back to the States, and with my reenlistment bonus of $1,000,
Oh.
I put down on a brand new car, of course.
Right.
Okay.
And my father and little brother had driven it back to Utah. And so after we returned, I flew out to Utah, spent a month of vacation, came back in my car, and promptly got thrown into the brig by two great big sergeants who told me I was going to go to jail forever because some person in Laos had given my name, rank, and service number to the dispersing officer, who in turn sent me a letter at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And because we were on a classified mission, I was going to go to jail forever. But my intentions when I got back were to make another trip, because the money was, it was like close to $500 a month in just per diem.
Right.
Whereas as a buck sergeant with jump pay, I was only making $250 a month.
Oh my gosh.
But
Yes,
because of the delay, I ended up, after the tour in Southeast Asia, the Army decided I needed to go to the Army Language School and to learn Polish, and then go to the 10th Special Forces in Germany and be assigned to a team that was, they were assigned to Poland. And at that time, I met my wife, and after a month, I proposed to her, and then a month later, we got married. So it didn't take very long to realize that salary wasn't going to work. I needed to improve my position somewhere.
right.
So at that time, the helicopter flight school had just started training again, and
Okay.
put in an application. And right 7 months after I was in Germany, they said, you have a class date. You're going to go back to the States and go to flight school and fly helicopters.
Very nice. All right.
So,
As a warrant officer, Ben.
yes,
Okay. So obviously improved your fighting position for pay right there, right?
yes, it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had about a year and a half at Fort Benning, Georgia, after flight school with the 11th Air Assault, where they tried to kill us just about daily. So I volunteered for Vietnam. And they said, no, you're going to stay right here until we finish this test of air mobility. And finally, after the 18 months, they sent me to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And from there, we deployed to Vietnam on board the USS Iwo Jima, which was a LPH.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've planted a Harrier on that area.
Yeah. As have I.
Yeah. Very cool. So, well, let me ask about flight school. Where'd you go to flight school? Was that at Fort Rucker?
Camp Walters, Texas.
Okay.
Oh, another Camp Walters. That's 2 weeks in a row.
Okay. So for just to cage my gyro, Ben, what year was that you reported to flight school?
I went through flight school in 1963.
1960.
Okay. They didn't call you the Hawk by chance, did they?
No.
Okay. No, just
Hey,
was this week or last?
Besides,
I've lost track.
It was
but
this week's. It
was this
last
week's
week.
show. Yeah. So the show. When this comes out, it'll be the show before this week. Last week, rather, 2 weeks ago. Bear with me, folks that are listening. Yeah, there was a gent who went through Fort Walters, and he found a little black book with numbers of Lawton, Oklahoma debutantes on it, and they all took advantage. So we were just wondering if you were the hawk and you left your black book behind.
No, he was.
But
married.
No, you were married at this
he
time.
He was married. He would.
Yeah, there you
black
go.
book. Yeah,
that's right.
That's awesome.
So, all right. And where exactly is your bride from? Is she from Poland or Germany?
No, she was from Fort Lauderdale, Arizona.
Okay.
Florida,
there.
Excuse me.
I meant when you knew.
She had gone through training with the Air Force and was a medic.
Okay.
To visit her sister, her sister's husband was in the class ahead of me in Polish. So she arranged for us to meet. And I decided, contrary to my popular thought, I had thought previous to meeting her that if I needed a wife, the Army would just issue me one.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. The Marine Corps does it that way.
Yeah.
I met her and we got married and went to Germany and then back to flight school. And after the tour in Vietnam, I went with the 1st A Company, 1st Aviation Battalion.
Okay.
And spent a year while she took care of the 2 little girls that we had. When I got back, the day that we left Saigon, I had orders to Germany. They were going to send me there for a 3-year tour as a pilot. However, they decided on the day that I was leaving that I was going to go to Fort Rucker, Alabama, become an instructor pilot, and go back to Vietnam in a year.
Oh, nice.
So
Okay. Yeah.
I told my wife, and she said, well, you may, but if you do, you will return a bachelor, and I will go to New York City and learn how to play the classical guitar. So we agreed that I should get out and start looking for a job. And as luck would have it, Saigon had started building up their helicopter fleet, and they were looking for pilots. So I put in a written application to Air America, and lo and behold, the next day I had a response.
Wow,
So,
that was fast. Okay.
We'd like you to fill out this application, and we'll get back with you. So they did the next day. And by a time period from Monday to Thursday, I had the application, and we had airline tickets from Dothan, Alabama to Washington, D.C., with rooms paid for by the government, and went in and had my nice suit that I had made up in Hong Kong. My wife was dressed in one of her lovely dresses that she made, and we were hired. And they said, can you leave next week? I explained to him that this was July and I had until August 22nd before I would be released from the Army.
Okay.
So at that time, they made arrangements for us to get passports, send them in to Washington, D.C., and then they would go ahead and get the visas and the airline tickets, whatever was required for us to get to Saigon. At that time, the military still, would not allow dependents, but government employees would. So my wife and 2 little girls showed up in Saigon in December. It was like 110, and they got off.
Yeah, but at least it was humid, right?
It was very humid. And my wife had made a nice red wool dress, a white cap, and gloves, because during the 30 years you had to you had to
Yeah.
dress up to travel.
Yeah.
Sure. Wow.
That must have been miserable. Oh my God.
So timeline wise, Ben, let's see. Toured Vietnam out of flight school, 64, 65. So was this about 1966?
It was signed up with Air America September 15th, 1966.
Okay. Holy cow. So then you stepped off a plane in Saigon in December with your family at 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, she was rather surprised because the wool dress was rather warm, and my two little girls, she made the dresses so they looked like twins, although 2 years apart. And she also brought a dog, which was another story, but
I would keep that dog.
Did she
on
bring barbecue sauce too,
a
or?
tight leash? Holy cow. Right? Well, if you wouldn't mind, can we back up a little bit? You kind of breezed over your flying tour in Vietnam in the Army.
Yeah.
You had a 6-month flying tour. Were you flying Hueys?
I had a year in Vietnam with the Army, and I flew the armed gunships. We had the rockets and the machine guns on pedestals mounted on each side.
Of the UH-1?
Yes.
Okay. H-1 gunships. Nice.
Yeah. Very cool. And what unit were you flying with there?
I was with the gun platoon in A Company, Hearst Aviation.
Okay, that's what you say. Yeah, all right. My apologies. I heard you say that and I missed it. So
we were down in the Delta.
Okay.
And for some reason, the whole year that we were there, the 101st Division was up in the central part of Vietnam. It was only like a 2-year period that we even supported them. The rest of the time, we were down the Delta supporting the Vietnamese Rangers.
Okay. And when you say the Delta, you're talking about the Mekong Delta, the Mekong River?
All the way down, they called Four Corps.
So did you see much action, or what time frame was this? What year was this?
This was 1965.
Okay, so things were picking up.
That was a good year, by the way.
Yeah.
Really good year.
In fact, we came over on the Iwo Jima when we had 77 UH-1D models in the cocoon, that white wrap they put all around them.
Yeah. Yep.
And when we arrived just off of Vung Tau, they took the wrapping off, put the masts and the blades on, and we flew off of the ship to Vietnam. But before we left, we had a brigadier general fly out on a helicopter and land and give us a little pep talk. And his name was Norton. But he said at that time,
it's like a Dr. Seuss book.
with the amount of people, I can't remember whether it was 3 companies or there was 2, maybe 4 companies on board for 77 aircraft. And we made a grand total of 40,000 American troops in country with us arriving. By the time we left a year later, it was over 400,000 American troops in country.
Wow. That's exponential.
Yeah.
In a year. Where are they? So was it constant like development of camps to put all these people? I mean, you must have seen a lot of change that year.
They spread them all out from Saigon north, basically. We did have a camp down on the Mekong River that had a company, I believe. And then you had your Navy Sea Wolves who had the swift boats going up and down the river. But the majority were probably up in Two Corps and High Corps.
Okay. You have any terrifying memories of gun runs or rocket runs from that first tour?
In fact, just recently we had a reunion in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we had an opportunity to speak to the Moon children who were the children from the survivors of the Lao people who got run out of Laos later. One of them was talking about, our time up there in country, and you look at all these little faces and you wonder what they're thinking, but it's obviously, their faces just light up when you answer their questions. Getting back to the military, I flew the gunships, and for the most part, we would go in on both sides of the troop carrying Hueys, and we would put down suppressive fire when they were going into the drop zone. Invariably, it seemed like we put the good guys right in the middle of the bad guys. It was easy to tell
Of course.
which ones were which because bad guys shot the hell out of you. So, on one particular occasion, we arrived, and because of communications with the radios, I was the only aircraft that had communications with the troops on the ground, and they were getting hammered from grazing fire from machine guns on both sides. So I took it upon myself to break from the formation and put down suppressive fire. And I guess I did that 3 or 4 times, ran out of ammunition and ideas and everything all about the same time. And then the rest of the platoon was able to come in, and I departed, went back in to get rearmed, resupplied, but we had too much damage and we couldn't go back out. But at that time, I was sure that with my 9 years in service, that I was, well trained, and if anybody could survive, I could.
Yeah, sure.
Some of those bullet holes tried to prove me wrong, but I did get a medal for that, and it was the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Okay, then that's saying something.
Yeah. Well, they don't just hand those out.
Yeah.
No.
No. I know. I asked them to. They said no. Wow. Okay. I told you, folks, he was a genuine American hero.
Genuine, that's for sure.
There you go. Fantastic.
Hey, on a gunship, then it was a pilot, co-pilot, and crew chief.
We had the crew chief in the left door and a door gunner who was assigned from the 25th Infantry Division in the right door.
Okay.
So we had, the capability of giving cover fire to ourselves and the other ship that I was wingman for. But we still took quite a lot of fire. And you were asking about cases where, I got to the point where after about 8 or 9 months, 10 months, I kind of went through that period of, I guess, PTSD, and we were making runs on a canal, and I was convinced there was 50 caliber machine guns shooting back at us. Later realizing it, the 2.75 inch rockets that we were firing that were leaving a trail. So anyhow, I got a break, and they said, you need to sit it out for a little while here, and they made me play at the slicks for the rest of the tour.
That's understandable. That's pretty awesome. Wow. Okay, so Air America was the way to
keep your hand in aviation.
Well, was the way to keep Mrs. Densley from becoming a professional musician in New York.
That's true.
That's right.
So she figured if I could go to Saigon, she could go to Saigon.
Sure.
Right on.
And so I left in September, and she got there in December with the girls and became a genuine bona fide camp follower. She stayed with me for the rest of the 4.5 years in Saigon, and 3.5 years up in Udorn, flying in Laos, and then coming back to Saigon for another 6 months.
Hold on. The
Okay.
math. So was that about? Was that 8 years total?
8 years,
Is that about-
2 months.
Holy shit!
But he wasn't counting, apparently.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, it was back when I left on my birthday, November 16th.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask a question, and if you can't answer, I totally understand. But when you applied to Air America and was interviewed, was it a separate entity or was it a covert CIA operation that was called Air America?
Well, it was definitely covert. Air America was the airline that supported all of the operations for the CIA. And, we never really knew that. And to this day, the CIA denies that we were part of the CIA.
What? Never heard of these guys. What?
Well,
Who are these guys?
they just like to be there and pick up down pilots,
There you go.
So could you walk us through? So what kind of missions did you do besides? So you did rescue missions, down pilots.
Well, basically, it was different depending on which country you were in. When we were flying in Saigon, we flew we'd go up, say, to Da Nang, and the operations manager would say, okay, you're going to go up to Phu, and then they'll assign you your missions from there. We'd go to Hue Phu, which was where the 101st ended up. And
Okay.
they would send us out to a special forces camp, and we'd land on the helipad, and the guy would run up out of the bunker and say, here's the mail and some groceries for these guys over here, but don't go too high because they've got SA-7s, which was an
Right.
Oh, yeah. Surface to air missile. Yeah.
So we would fly low level, nap of the earth, whatever you want to call it,
Okay.
deliver the mail, groceries, pick up people that needed to go back in for R&R or whatever. And we'd do that for a fuel load, about 2 hours. And then I remember this one particular day, because we were an airline, we had the same rules and regulations as Pan American, TWA, and all the
Sure.
big
Yeah. Duty
airlines.
day. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Duty day
So we
restrictions
had
and that
to
sort of thing.
fly regular route checks and check rides. And I was a check airman, but I needed a route check. So the chief pilot was flying with me, and every time we'd come back, the sergeant would run up out of the bunker and hand us mail or whatever. And the very last one, we called him on the radio and told him we were going to have to depart and go back to Da Nang for fuel. And it was really hot day, and we're sweating like pigs. And landed, and the sergeant came up out of the bunker with 2 San Miguel cold
Right on.
in his hand, and he handed him in the left window to the chief pilot, who was giving me the check ride. And he looked at him and he said, here, Ben, you hold this one, and I'll hold the gun to your head while you drink it, and then you can hold the gun to my head.
That's a show title there. I'll hold the gun to your head while you drink it.
That's outstanding. I bet it tasted amazing.
It did. That was the best beer. So,
Oh my gosh.
That is fantastic.
So I don't know why this question just popped into my head, but I was envisioning the scene play out while you're describing it. So when you were flying, okay. So first of all, what were the markings on the airplanes and helicopters? Were they camouflaged at all, or did it look like were they?
Did you look military or civilian? Yeah.
It
we
looks
were definitely civilian. The
Okay.
aircraft was a silver color with
Okay.
dark blue striping, and said Air America on the fuselage.
Okay.
But one thing different on the B models in Saigon, we had 10 B model helicopters, and 6 had been made in the United States in the Bell plant and sent over to Saigon, and 4 were made in Japan by Kawasaki on an agreement with them. And the biggest difference was that they had the smaller L11 engine, but they had the 48-foot rotor system. And
Okay.
then they also had a baggage compartment in the tail boom. And so you could open that baggage compartment door and you could put some cans of oil, or the mechanic could put his toolbox back in there. So it was quite a bit different than the Army guys. And because they were smaller and lighter, we delighted on being with the Army guys while we were parked, and then we'd start up and do a vertical takeoff just to show them we could do it.
Yeah, instead of having to get forward translational lift. Yeah. So we should probably confess to you that I don't want to speak for repeat for everything, but I will for this. We are deathly afraid of helicopters. Both of us. We think they're
Only slightly terrified.
They're whirling death traps, and the fact that I'm guessing, how many hours did you fly in the helicopter?
In helicopters, about 12,000.
Oh my God!
You are truly a historical figure in my book, just because you survived 12,000 hours of flying rotary winged airplanes. 12,000 hours,
right? That's a lot of talking like this on the radio.
So what was the standard crew makeup when you were flying for Air America? Was it aircraft commander and then a co-pilot and then a crew chief or mechanic?
Yes, but for the most part, we were just getting the operation, the helicopter operation, started in Saigon. So we flew generally 2 captains in the front 2 seats and then a mechanic in the back.
What was it's a 2-part question. What was either the funniest or the most terrifying thing you got to do doing that job? And did you have to do it more than once?
Probably more than once, but
okay.
The one that really comes to mind was the tail boom in the Huey, and the mechanic that we had one day when we left Da Nang and went down to a little village called Hoi An. And the mission was to return a soldier who had been killed back to where he was born. That was, I guess, the agreement that the military had with their soldiers. So when we arrived at Hoi An, they had the body in a casket, which barely fit in the back of the Huey. And then they had a 100-pound bag of rice, and then they had about 4 passengers. So obviously this wasn't all going to fit in the back. So we said, okay, let's take a breather here and try and work this out. And our mechanic was about half crazy, maybe all the way crazy. But we went around on the other side of the aircraft, and the co-captain and myself were talking, and just all hell broke loose. And there's people screaming and hollering, and we went around to the other side of the aircraft where the cargo door was, or the baggage compartment door was.
Okay.
And the mechanic had taken the body out of the casket and was trying to stuff the body
into the boom.
Had rigor mortis. And he was trying to stuff it in the tail boom. And, the soldiers who were there accompanying the body were ready to shoot everybody. we got it all quieted down, and then eventually we had to make 2 trips to get everybody out to the grave site and the casket and the body. But
Oh man.
another different situation entirely was up in Laos. I'd been only in country for a couple of months, so I was flying with another captain who'd been up there for several years, and we refueled. And when we turned on the radios, we heard the people working out on the plains de Jars, they had a mayday. And it turned out one of the B-28s had an American pilot, and he engaged a machine gun that really did a job on him. So he was headed off of the plains de Jars to the south, and when he finally had to punch out because the flames and whatever going over the canopy, he lost his weapon, his canteen, and everything except for his survival radio, and came down in trees. So there were about 5 Air America helicopter pilots in the area, but I was the only one that had a rescue hoist. So
Okay.
when we showed up, I had a mechanic in the back and the other co-captain, and one of the aircraft that had been there when the guy went into the trees dropped a red smoke grenade, and I hovered down over the top of the trees, and we put down 265 feet of cable and could not get down to the guy.
Oh my gosh.
And by now he'd been on the ground. He'd only been on the ground for maybe 20 minutes, but he was completely dehydrated, didn't have any water. So I told the other guys, we're going to go down there. Swear to God, I said this. I don't even believe I said it, but I told him we're going to go down and we're going to get him out of there, or we're going to join him. So I hovered down into the trees, and Huey's got a really good blade. I mean, they've got that big leading edge. I don't know what kind of steel is, stainless steel or whatever, but we mowed small limbs, trees, leaves, and the whole world was green. And then as we
this is terrifying.
as we got below the canopy, I told the mechanic, keep my tail rotor out of anything that's going to knock it off.
Yeah.
The other pilot, I said, on your side, keep us away from anything big enough that it'll take the blade off. And we got down and got low enough for him to get on the jungle penetrator, and we brought him out and got him back into the aircraft, and then went back to 20 Alternate, which was the main base up in Laos. And in the 10-minute trip back to 20 Alternate, he drank all of our 3 canteens of water and was very happy that we got him out of there.
I bet.
We hit to the mechanics that supported the P-28 program, which were small single-engine fighter bombers.
Right.
And told them that we had Jim Fix on board. That was the pilot's name. And by the time
Okay.
we landed, they were there with the Jeep, immediately grabbed him, and away they went. So we had all this stuff on the airplane and on the blades. So we spent about a half an hour trying to get all that stuff off. And then we're looking for the pilot.
Right.
And he was so drunk that they had sent him to Vientiane on a fixed wing. And I was unable to make contact with him. I knew who he was. And the Ravens, which are the forward air controllers up on the PDJ,
Yeah.
They knew who he was, but the guy who was in charge of the association at the time couldn't seem to stay sober long enough to be in contact with him. So I finally went to the Aero Commander Squadron in Eglin Air Force Base, talked to the Sergeant Major who was in charge of the newsletter, told him my little story about picking up this guy, and I said, I think at least he owes me a drink.
Right
You
on.
think?
Well, yeah, I appreciate your story there. I know the guy. I'll get with him, and then if he wants to talk to you, and I'm sure he will, then he'll get in touch with you. And turned out I was working for NASA over here at Cape Canaveral at the time, flying helicopters and the airplanes for NASA.
Okay.
So I got a hold of him, and we were going up to Birmingham to visit a friend, and he lived in Pensacola. So just took off. My wife and I went up to Pensacola, and he bought us lunch, and we talked about, the picking him up and the fact that you shouldn't take on machine guns that shoot you down.
Yeah.
So he paid for our dinner at Applebee's, and we went out to the parking lot, and he said, just a minute. Went over to his Corvette, popped the trunk, and brought me a case of Scotch. And said,
Now
Well,
that's
damn.
more-
There, right on. All right. Yeah. Yeah. At least he didn't give you a full canteen of water. Here's your canteen back, sir.
whole case of Scotch.
Wow.
That's what Punchy was flying.
That's as soon. Yeah. So
I know.
episode 54 was Punchy. He was flying a T-28 and wound up going down. I was going, man, is this going to be Punchy?
I was thinking the same thing, but
Yeah.
Punchy's didn't turn out like that.
No.
What year was that rescue happened?
19,
Okay. And you mentioned what a jungle penetrator, or you mentioned a jungle penetrator. Would you tell folks what a jungle penetrator actually is and what it does?
well, as the title kind of indicates, it's a device that they lower down through the canopy in the jungle, and it's quite heavy, and it's on the end of a cable which is attached to the hoist in the helicopter. And on the penetrator, it has 3 folding legs, and so when it gets down to where you are, you can unfold the legs, and then you crawl on and just wait.
Hang on for dear life. Will they pull you back up? Yeah. And hopefully
Well,
they
it's
hover. Will they pull you up?
It's got a attachment. You can strap your D ring to it if you're wearing a harness.
Yeah.
So if you
Most of the time, they really didn't. When
They didn't have
got
the- they didn't
down
have-
to them, they didn't have anything except good old manual manipulation there. to
good
hang
Lord, hanging on
Right.
for dear life.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that's a horrifying story for many reasons.
With a good ending, a case of scotch.
With a happy ending, but the chopping of the trees and going, how far down do you think
That's
you went
terrifying.
through the tops of the trees to get to him? 50 feet.
The
You had to
area that
guess?
he went into, the terrain was very steep, and the trees were about 250 feet tall.
Oh my
Couldn't
gosh.
believe it. A worse scenario you couldn't find, really.
Oh, right.
We
Oh,
were
my
able to
God.
get down and get to where he could get onto the penetrator, and then we pulled him up and out.
What terrifies me the most about that is the thought of you slowing down your main rotor enough. I mean, you've got to maintain RPM on that thing to keep flying. And you start slowing that thing down, you were going to
Hey.
go down and join them.
Don't start talking like you know what the hell you're talking
I
about.
know just
Come
enough. I know
on.
just enough helicopter aerodynamics to be terrified of those things.
You're starting to really worry me.
Well, they have on the Huey, all of them have a governor. So
Okay.
to maintain your RPM.
Hmm.
It's automatic. You pull up and they increase. And you
Okay.
And they maintain the RPM for you, which is a lot better than when you go through flight school. You're flying the little recip, and you've got to maintain RPM and pitch and everything
Okay.
all at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Was that the OH?
The OH-23 and then the OH-13.
Okay.
We had a problem when we went to Germany because they terminated my 3-year commitment and sent us back for flight school. The Army decided that we owed them for the shipment of our household goods.
What?
So to get around that,
Why does that not surprise me?
the Army commandant arranged for us to be what they called tigers, and we stayed at Camp Walters there for an additional 3 months instead of going to Fort Rucker, Alabama. And we flew the OH-13 with little machine guns on the side. And the other guys went to Fort Rucker and flew the H-34s and H-21s.
Okay. Wow. The H-34, that looks like a beast. We had Duber on. I forget what show number he was, but he was also in the 50s somewhere. But he just took possession of an H-34, and they're going to be in Pensacola 20th of June for a reunion of the Ugly Angels. That's a beast of an airplane.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Ben, did you fly fixed wing airplanes for Air America as well?
No, I flew helicopters exclusively for 20 years. And then I had the break-in service, and the Army had let everyone go home after Vietnam. So they put out a little blurb in the Army Times and said basically, if you want to put in for recalled active duty, we will put you back in the same data rank, time in service, and be like you never left. So my wife,
Wow.
after the birth of my son in 1972, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so I knew in future, sometime, I was going to have medical insurance and coverage for her. So I put in for recalled and active duty and went right back into Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and stayed there for 4 years. Then went to Hawaii for my overseas assignment with my family. And on the way back, I called Washington, D.C. and asked for my future assignment. And they said, well, I was the 25th Infantry Division safety officer. So they said, we're going to send you to Fort Riley, Kansas. And my wife immediately started to cry.
I'd cry.
I was just about ready to cry myself, but I said, man, isn't there anything? And as luck would have it, because of the break-in service, guys in the flight school ahead of me were now up in DA in Washington, D.C. So I'm talking to a guy that was in the class ahead of me, and I said, and I've been in divisional life or divisional units, 7 years in special forces, and first, and couldn't I get like fixed wing? He said, well, just a minute. So he said, I'll get back with you. So he called me back and he said, the Army has changed their requirements now. And instead of taking only young pilots that would have 4 to 6 years in fixed wing, they're taking old guys and rewarding them with fixed wing before they retire. So I put in my application with some blood and tears and was accepted for flight school. And when he called back, he said, you're going to go through the multi-engine course at Fort Rucker. Alabama, and then you will be assigned to Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Sierra Vista.
Wife immediately started to cry again because all she could see was sand dunes and desert, and as it turned out, it was quite a nice assignment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice mountain right there by the
Yeah.
fort. And,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right by the border.
Wow.
yeah, just enough. What was it, about 70 miles south of Tucson there, right on the border.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were in a flight detachment, so we had U-21 and C-12, and that was another thing. Because of my safety, I was the MACOM safety officer, and we had a 3-star general who would fly to his office in Washington, D.C. quite often. So we'd put him in the C-12, take off, go to Washington, D.C., and spend 2 or 3 days while he did his business, and then take him back to Fort Huachuca. It was a good assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So we're going to take a quick minute and thank our sponsor, Robbie Walling.
So there I was, staring at my retirement account, thinking, man, I should have talked to Robbie Walling at HSI Wealth Strategies about 20 years ago.
Oh,
I had a budget, a spreadsheet, a dream, but in reality, that's not enough, Fig.
Repeat. I've known Robbie for over a decade, and let me tell you, the guy's as solid as they come. Aircraft commander in a C-130. He's sharp as a tack, and he gets us. Military and airline.
Exactly. We're smart folks. Just ask us, right? Plan a flight down to the minute. Different airspace there, man, and HSI knows how to navigate that.
You know, on average, their clients. So
Yeah.
why approach retirement that way? Because we're basically talking about kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
I talked to a guy, he's one of my peers, who has spent money in all the right places, but had no idea that he was setting himself up for like a tax meltdown down the road. Smart guy. He just didn't have the right map.
Yeah, right. I mean, Uncle Sam has long fingers that reach way down into your pockets when you least expect it. Right?
Right.
So let the professionals at HSI do what they do best so you can keep flying safely into retirement.
Yeah. Don't be a moron. Call Robbie at 214-538-7030. That's 214-JET-7030.
Or email him, robert.walling@nm.com. That's robert.walling, WALLING, at novembermike.com. Look, don't wait until your final approach to start thinking about retirement. Do it now. Your future self will thank you.
Trust us. Don't be that guy.
Don't do it. Call Robbie.
So you're flying fixed wing. How long did you do that before you separated?
I believe about 3 years at Fort
Okay.
Huachuca, and then I got out of the Army in 1986 and retired.
So with broken time, how much time did you have total? That still sounds like a lot of time.
13,000, I think.
Okay. Damn. And what fixed wing flying did you do?
Well, I lucked out. I had, because of flying special project with Air America, I had twin engine helicopter time, which was basically the H-34 with twin turbines installed in the nose.
Okay.
So I accumulated some multi-engine time there. And when I retired, I was looking around and I found a job with Emory Air Freight. My
Okay.
friend of mine from Air America was the chief pilot, and so I got hired as a co-pilot on the heavy DC-60 73.
Okay. I bet that was a fun airplane to fly, the DC.
That was. It was quite a change, if you will, going from C-12 under 12,000 pounds to a airplane that grosses out at 355,000 pounds.
I know exactly of which you speak. Yeah, we flew the Harrier. What was that thing maxed out at with full load of weapons and fuel, Fig? About 34, 35, somewhere in there?
Yeah, like 30, I think 34 and some change.
Yeah.
Right around there.
Yeah, and then I got hired to a DC-10, which held over 40,000 pounds of fuel in one wing. So, yeah, that's a big difference. But you got to see the world.
Yes, got to go up and down all over the U.S. and then on weekends, occasionally could pick up a flight to Brazil and back on the same weekend. So it was
nice.
It was a good job. But after a year and a half, I got very tired of staying up all night and being real smart at 6 a.m. I started
Ricky knows about.
As a night cargo pilot, I feel your pain.
I started looking
That's awesome.
for a job after about a year and a half.
Okay.
At that time, I saw a article about the NTSB was looking for air accident investigators.
Okay.
And with my background, I've gone all the way from company to MACOM aviation safety. I put that on my application, and a couple weeks later was on a trip to Kennedy to spend a weekend there, and went in for an interview and got hired by the National Transportation Safety Board in New York City.
Nice.
9 states that we were responsible for accident investigation.
Okay. And how many accidents did you appear on scene for over the course of that? How long did you do that?
I did that for a year and a half.
Okay.
Until I found out that the managers at the different locations had a little pool that they put money in, and if you saved a bunch of money by not promoting your pilots or the investigators, that they divvied it up at the end of the year.
Oh, they got
and split it amongst themselves.
Gave themselves a little bit of bonus.
Job again, and as luck would have it, a good friend of mine worked for Donald Trump. And at that time, see, this was in the late 80s. He had Trump Air, which was a shuttle.
Right.
DC.
He bought the shuttle and became the Trump shuttle. Yeah.
And then he had Trump Air, which we had H-61s, just like Marine One.
Okay.
We flew from New York City to Atlantic City on a schedule, so we were 135.
Okay.
And then we later acquired 2 of the Boeing Vertol 234 helicopters, which is a tandem rotor Chinook, basically.
Okay.
And of course, we had his Augusta, his Puma, that he flew on when we take him down to Atlantic City.
Now, what was that airplane like? I'm not familiar with that one.
The Augusta Puma was a twin engine that was used mainly by the military, I believe. But the reason that Trump liked to use it rather than flying on the H-21s was that it had a shorter wheelbase. It had wheels up under the cockpit and then another one maybe 8 feet behind that.
Okay.
The advantage was then he could land on top of Trump Castle down in Atlantic City and didn't have to hop in a limo or whatever to get to work.
Sure. That's fantastic. I'll see if I can get a picture of that up for the stream. Although I'm not sure how many people are watching the stream. I screwed that up too, Fig. With growing pains, we We aren't necessarily live streaming anywhere but here on Riverside. I did send out a bunch of invitations with the links so people could watch here, but we're not going out to YouTube or Rumble or any of that tonight because I ain't as smart as I look. And that's pretty dumb. So, okay. I managed to get a picture of the Puma, but I'm not sure I can get it up. Okay. So you flew, I'm sorry, which airplane for them? The Puma. You flew the Puma.
No, I flew the S-61, which was
the 61. Okay.
line. We had 3 of those that we flew on a schedule from 34th Street Heliport in New York on the Hudson down to Atlantic City, and then we'd wait there and take passengers back up to West 34th Street to go back wherever they went in New York.
How long was that flight, Ben?
The flight,
Yeah, was that
it was like 35
25
minutes, pretty short.
Yeah, I bet that 3 or 4 times faster than rail or driving.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So of all the jobs, of all the airplanes you flew over the years, which job would you like to do again? If you could do it all over, which job would you like to do the entire time and make a career of it? Which was the most fun airplane or the most fun job?
Well, the most fun job was with Air America. And
Okay.
after 8 years and 2 months, except for the fact the bad guys were trying to kill us, it was a good job.
Well, except for that part, you didn't take that personally, did you?
Well, occasionally, you, I think, asked previously about a real exciting time. We were working up in the northwestern portion of Laos, and the customer came out and said that we needed to go up on a search and rescue mission because they had a Thai patrol that had engaged a bunch of bad guys and they had wounded. And so they wanted us to go and pick up the wounded guy and drop off some more supplies. And so we said, okay, how did he get wounded? Well, it's a perfectly safe area, but he got shot. That's okay. He got shot, but it's all right. It's safe. So
Sure, it's safe.
I said, okay, well, it's going to be a 2-ship mission. The one ship, I again had the SAR rescue hoist aircraft, and the other aircraft was going to take in replacement people and medical supplies and pick up the wounded person and bring them back out. So we took off and we were headed towards a town called Pak Bang, which at the time was the lower end of the Chinese road that came down towards the Thai border. And when we arrived on scene, it was like just a hump of a little mountain, and the group were huddled on the top of this little mountaintop in a circle facing out with their weapons.
Ooh.
So there's your first indication that this is not all that we counted on. So
Clue bird strike?
they said, your air cover isn't here yet. So I said to the other pilot, I said, okay, I'm going to go south of the intended landing spot, and I'm going to circle and orbit while you go out to the east, because whenever the air cover shows out, then I can just come in, make a run over the top of the guy who's wounded and tell you exactly where he's located, and then you can come in from the direction that I'm going out. Seemed like a good plan at the time. So 45 minutes later, evidently the bad guys, it kind of figured out that we were there for some reason. And when the T-28s showed up as our air cover, I said, okay, told the other pilot, I'm going to start my roll-in from the south, and I'll come out to the east, and you can just follow my trail back in. So I rolled in, kept my airspeed up, fortunately. I was going about 70 knots, I guess, as I turned out, and about 250 little bad guys shot the bejesus out of me. So I'm shaking pretty good, and the instruments are a little hard to see, and I'm getting further and further away.
President Trump saying don't release any more secrets.
So we finally got clear of all the fire, and the forward air controller naturally said something I didn't want to hear, which was, "You're on fire." And I didn't have any place to go. And so that was the last thing I wanted to hear. And the mechanic looked underneath, and what had happened is one of the rounds had hit something big enough that it knocked a hole in our fuel bladder and was allowing all of the fuel to drain out of the fuel bladder into the belly of the aircraft and then looked like smoke coming out the rear. So we continued out. There was no place to land. It was total jungle canopy. And then there was a place to land. So I brought it in, landed, and the mechanic jumped out and told me to shut it off, and I did. And we had JP4 all over the place, but no fire.
Boy.
And the other aircraft came in and picked us up and took us back to the main base. And I said, well, that's it for me today. And I went back, went home.
Wow.
That's not your average day at work right there.
No.
Oh, it was.
For anybody.
And
Wow.
when you got
Wow.
when you got bullets coming up through the bottom of the aircraft, it just missed the co-pilot's left foot. The round came through the forward cross tube, which the mechanic was, well, we didn't have guns, of course, because we were non-combatants, but he was returning fire with an M, and the round came right up between his legs. Another one came up through the instrument package, and the fuel cell, both blades, and I think the oil reservoir too. So they got us pretty good in about 2 seconds.
Man. And what kind of rounds were they? 50 cals or roughly?
AK.
Really? That's small. So pretty small arms fire. Okay. Damn.
Whoa, and there's 250 of them. Small really doesn't matter.
Well, that's fair enough. There's a lot of lead still coming up range, as it were.
Oh, my gosh.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you for your service. Just really doesn't do.
No.
Really doesn't say much. But thank you for your service, sir.
You're welcome.
Right.
Oh,
Thank you.
Holy shit. We've been going for, oh my gosh.
Hour and a half.
An hour and a half. We should
So
probably land this helicopter.
All right.
Absolutely. So,
well, I want to say, obviously, thank you to all of our veterans who listen to this program. Thank you for your service. Thank you to your families who support you and us. And also, thanks to Sadie and Dave at Backbeat Media.
yeah, Sadie and Dave Hamilton over at Backbeat Media online, backbeatmedia.com, handling our advertising. We're appreciative of that. And Dave gave us the know-how to put a whole podcast together in the first place. So
we're having some growing pains right now.
Yeah.
This is the new recording platform, but we'll figure it out.
yeah, we're getting there.
Repeat
So
will figure it out. I'm not going to figure it out.
now, in the audio version of this, I can tell you when we talk about Robbie Walling at HSI Wealth Strategies, you will hear the sponsor read that Fig and I did. What you won't hear is me talking to my son in the background and getting another beer and all that stuff because I left my mic hot. I'll mute that because we get a separate track. So, it's what we do.
Yep.
But
Well,
a couple other folks we need to thank.
fortunately for me, I had a stroke about a month ago, but I have a son he specializes in people who've had strokes. And
Okay.
so when I woke up Sunday morning, he was there and he immediately started rehab. And so I've lost no control of the hand, except it's pain in the fanny when you're trying to eat and you're out in public and you don't want to drop food in your lap and stuff like that. But I also have a number 3 daughter who's a nurse, and then my number 1 daughter who is my caretaker here. And immediately when I was having problems, she got the call out to 911 and got things started.
Oh, well, praise God
Well,
that
if you
happened.
would-
You haven't missed a beat.
No, if you wouldn't have said anything, I wouldn't even have known that you had recently had a stroke. Because you're a badass.
Yeah, right?
Experience.
Yeah, right. Hey, I thought of a question, and if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a
Do it, man.
question. You know, some years ago, gosh, it's probably 20 years ago now, right? Maybe the Mel Gibson movie Air America.
Air America,
Yes.
yeah.
Are you familiar with that
Yes,
movie?
I've seen it.
Is that a very? I know
How much Hollywood?
Yeah, was that a fairly accurate depiction of some of the things Air America did?
No,
That you
not at all. But
okay?
I thought it was
Okay.
quite funny and entertaining, especially
Oh, yeah.
when he's going down into the trees and he says that's what he does best.
Yeah, I crash better than anyone I know, he says.
Okay.
Oh, right.
Let's see, where were we? Hey, we need to say thanks to Brad Silcott at BDS Aviation, aka
Badass.
Badass. Thank you. I just saw some pictures he took recently. I don't know if it was today or this weekend.
A VMA 223 bird.
VMA 223 Bubbas.
Yeah.
3 of them. Yeah, really good pictures.
How does he do that? That's amazing. His
I don't know.
BDSaviationphotography.com. They aren't pictures, they're art.
You know, it's true. Sticks and Bago. I think Sticks is in the background here somewhere right now.
He is. Styx actually has us up and streaming on YouTube already through OBS. So God bless you, Styx, man.
Yeah. Thanks,
We
Sticks.
are deeply appreciative of that. So there's a couple other people I always seem to forget.
Well, that is the sound of the Dos Gringos, who are the F-16 pilots that make the Air Force sound good, and who subsequently
Are going to be where?
they're going to be at the Flight Co. in
When?
Denver, June 7th,
Boom.
and it's a concert to raise funds to bring an F-16 to the museum there.
Yeah. Fig and I are both going to be in Denver on June 7th for the Dos Gringos concert. Come see
Wings
us.
Over the Rockies.
Wings Over
Wings
Rockies.
Over the Rockies Air
Yeah.
Museum.
Yeah. So come on out, say hello, and hear some great music from guys who have cut 4 albums, the guys that make the Air Force sound good. Not one of them. Not safe for work, but other than that, they're good. Hey, go on over to the So There I Was.us/merch. Get yourself some cool show merch. Or So There I Was.us/new lips. US/rate. What should you do if you go over there, Fig?
Give us a 5-star rating, damn it. And if you can't, well, tell us what we need to do to make it 5 stars. Because
Yeah.
we're trainable.
Exactly. And if you insist on 4 stars or 3 stars or 2 stars or, God forbid, 1 star, go
Give it
give it to
somebody
another.
else. There's
Yeah,
plenty
pick
out
another
there.
show. There's a million other shows out there. Don't do that to us. We wouldn't do it to you.
No, and share the show. Share the show. Doesn't cost
Share the
nothing to
show.
Share the show. Yeah.
You're driving down the road right now. You're listening to this. Pull over and share the show with 2 friends and make them share it with 2 friends and help us grow. So, hey, all of our friends over at Patreon. So there was.us/Patreon. The donors. Nick gave us a Tanker Aircraft Commander donation last month. He told us he's going to do it again next month. God bless you, Nick. And all of you donors who have been with us, some of you guys have been with us almost 3 years now. Unbelievable. We're going to get a thank you out to all of you. We will dedicate a thank you to you soon. It's amazing. It's humbling that you've lost all sense of financial management sense.
You've all lost your minds, but we are so humbled and appreciative that you do. Thank you.
We are indeed. So until next week, folks, we don't know what else to say except, I don't know, don't sit on the collective.
Oh, don't sit on the collective.
Don't do. Hold on. It's what?
He said it's over.
Pilot hijinks?
Yeah.
This is psychotic behavior, man.
Well, here at Air America, what's considered psychotic behavior anywhere else is just company policy.
That was well done, sir.
And we're
Well done.
out.